Welcome to Data in Orbit, the Constellation podcast. I am Oxana, and alongside me is my co-host Rashad. In each episode, we talk to data leaders who are transforming industries by building data-driven organizations. Let's launch. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining back another episode of Data in Orbit. Today, we have a very special guest, Karen Pfeifer, currently SVP of Enterprise Data at Audacy, and she joined there in 2023. She comes with over 25 years of experience in the media industry, holding leadership roles at Disney, Hulu, Comcast, NBCU, DirecTV, and AT&T. Karen's expertise lies in data strategy, product platforms, governance, science, and analytics. She actually holds a BA in music from UCLA and an MS in analytics and data science from St. Joseph's University. So I also want to add everything that Karen will share today here with us reflect her personal opinions and is not reflective of her current employer, Audacy. So thanks, Karen, for being here and spending some time to talk to me.
Thanks, Oxana. I'm super excited to talk to you. Thank you so much for inviting me onto the call.
Great. So we're going to be exploring and talking a bit about enterprise data readiness and also how GenAI data readiness looks like. And let's start with defining this term. So what does data readiness actually mean in the context of an enterprise?
Right. So the way that I'm looking at it today anyways, and it seems like things are evolving, minute by minute in the data world for sure, is, data readiness means having high quality, accessible data that's organized and ready to be used for analytics and decision making, right? So it's critical today because data-driven insights are essential for staying competitive, agile, and innovative.
And so what are some of the challenges for companies to get in this ready state or even measuring what their readiness level is? What would you say from your experience, what you've seen?
Well, different organizations, different sizes, different phases, right? You have some organizations that are, brand new. And so a lot for them will be, well, where do we get our data sources from and how are we going to ingest them appropriately? How much to ingest, how much to keep, those sorts of answers. And then you have the more mature organizations that have already gone through those assessments and are really on the next evolution part of it of trying to make sure that the data quality is consistent and the data are governed correctly. So, I mean, organizations to assess their readiness level would probably want to go through some sort of audits, make sure that they've got at the bare minimum basic data quality checks, make sure that they're evaluating their data infrastructure and ensuring that they have the right tools for the right job and are not, overdoing too many tools, right? Trying to keep it simple at first. And then also just recognizing that all along the way, they're going to continue to hit common challenges in any data organization, regardless of the maturity, right? Data silos, poor data quality, lack of data governance, or even understanding of what data governance even is. And then, maybe some insufficient skills too, like making sure to keep focusing on the human factor of it, where you want to have sufficient skills and skill your team up.
Yeah, and talking about building, what would you say are some of the things you've learned through experience that help build scalable data architecture that can grow alongside the business needs?
It's trying to make sure that we are, I think I sort of mentioned this before, that we want to make sure that we're understanding, okay, do I need to build a data lake? Do I need to build a data warehouse? Do I need both? When we're building things out, we're looking to keep the teams, especially if you're in a smaller company, as lean as possible. And so what that means is building smart with automations in mind. There's so many fantastic tools out there today,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that are being built and coming online that are allow teams to have more automations built around for them in a smart way using AI instead. we'll talk about, I think, the Gen AI approach a little bit later on in the conversation, I imagine, because everybody is asking about that. But that really leaves great opportunities for the teams to, um, get rid of that busy work and make it more automation. For example, to, pick up, uh, news sources that are being brought in intelligently, scan it, suggest different data quality, um, you know, different data quality flags and data types, and make it something that it's or tagging that needs to be done in a more automated fashion, so the team isn't having to spend so much time thinking about those things, even though that is key and core for scalability. Because ultimately, and what you're talking about with scalability is you're saying, okay, I want to be able to know that when I deliver this thing to my stakeholder, right?
Mhm.
Um, can I be responsive to the inevitable changes and questions that come out of the data we're presenting to them, right? When you present something, the natural next step in the cycle is that that is going to generate new insights that have more questions and need more types of data that you're going to bring in, right? So if you don't have that lineage and that observability on the data, then it's really hard to be flexible and scalable with your architecture, with what you've built, right? You want your architecture to be able to do that. And um, that includes all of those different types of infrastructure and tools that you would need to be more automated with what you do to kind of, again, like I said earlier, move away from the busy work.
So, sort of to enable the team to move faster, and as those new insights come in or like new questions are asked, then you sort of have the tools and some help to make you deliver that next batch faster.
Yeah, yeah, you said it great. I know that you've in your past you've lived and breathed this like
Yeah.
every day, right? So I know you felt that pain before. So yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
totally. Yes, yes, yes. Next, I'm curious on this data readiness for enterprises, and this is your personal opinion. Like, whose responsibility is it this within an organization to get to this data readiness state?
Well, that's a good question. I often like to say that data and managing data is a team sport, and I think it really starts from the very beginning of the business is asking for something, what are their objectives, right? But then when we get into data readiness, like data teams often, even enterprise data teams, like the ones I've been on, we're downstream recipients of the data, right? So it takes a strong partnership with the upstream teams that are the collection um, sources or points of those teams. It can come from many different platforms. Companies these days are very much sort of build by acquisition, right? So you could have a
Mhm.
company that's on AWS and another company that's on GCP, and then somebody else that you bring in that's been primarily just building everything on Snowflake and who knows what else. And so you end up having to kind of figure out how to bring in those data and make sure, again, that it is ingested all in the same way and integrated and normalized in the same way. And then obviously build products that are um, built for more than just one domain if you can, right? Because companies don't probably often have the luxury of building very specific bespoke domain products, right? You want to be able to build something once and be able to have that be serviced for multiple different domains in the company. So when I think of data readiness, that's the first area I would start in, is making sure that you're working with your partners upstream and you have a good process. If you don't even have service level agreements, at least you want to have operational level agreements with those teams about how the data are handed over, and then making sure that you're focusing on the data quality first, and then observability on top of that second, and then build up a layer cake there of a really good, strong foundation of understanding what data is there. I'll say one more thing on that is that often I see companies just start collecting data for data's sake. So again, it comes back to having that good data product practice of making sure that whatever you're going to bring onto the platform, you've gone through that process of, okay, at least at the very least going through and going, okay, this data that we're going to bring on, we estimate it's going to be about this much data. We estimate it's going to cost us this much to store. We're going to consider how much compute it's going to cost us to do all the transformation integration of the data, and then how much compute it's going to cost us to do all the analytics on top of it, and at least have an ROI swag in your head of what that cost is compared to the value, right? If you have that luxury, you want to try to do that. And that to me is at least the start of data readiness on an enterprise scale.
Yeah, that sounds simple, but at the same time, it's so complicated to measure that ROI. It's like the biggest challenge data leaders have. How do you know which data to leverage, which use cases to exploit? I was actually talking about this earlier today. And as you're thinking of ingesting new data sources, how do you even know or how do you even measure ahead of time the benefits that could bring? Unless it's obvious. But when teams are more mature, it's these new data sources that maybe are going to improve the model, or maybe you're going to get very interesting insights out of it. But you have to make a bet, put the time and the resources and the effort, and then see if that has the expected return. And you and I both know that experimentation is not as quick as we would like it to be within data. So it's a real challenge to decide what are the right use cases that are worth pursuing versus those that won't have as much returns.
That's a great point. I mean, playing off your point about the time and effort, right? I imagine this, a lot of it too, going back to the team sport concept, is that, you know, there's been a lot of focus and practice on product, right? But a lot of it is also the partnership with your analytics partners as well, kind of being the first touch points with the business. And it can be simple in a way, right? It can be that, someone might come to you with a big idea on the product side or the data product side, but then you want to work and partner with have a strong relationship with your enterprise and your analytics and insights, business insights teams that are embedded with the business, and say, okay,
Right.
what is this dashboard or this output that we're looking for, and mock it up, right? Work with them to kind of understand, hey, what is this end goal that we want to do? And then start simple and say, okay, what are the data sources and the things that we need to build in a more productized pipeline that are governed for this? And you might initially say, hey, um, the capability, we there's often this term in governance of capability maturity model, right? And so maybe it's something that's like a lower on the end capability maturity model. Everyone understands that it might break, and just build that MVP in. And that's really where it starts, is this sense of always being open to it being iterative, and you're not trying to build some in the old school style of some big bang dashboard that you're wowing everyone with right away, right? It's
Right.
got to
Yeah.
be iterative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We go back to the waterfall or agile method, right? And how, of course, we stick to agile for a reason. Yeah, great. Let's move into Gen AI data readiness. It's the hot topic of the year, I guess. So, what is Gen AI readiness, data readiness, for enterprises, and how is it different from traditional data readiness?
Well, that's a really great question. And we've been exploring that. I explore that right now, trying to really get a sense of what the differences are. And I mean, just speaking to the terminology itself, I'll do the air quotes of Gen AI data readiness. And it refers to that process of preparing your organization's data for use with generative AI technologies, right? In its pure and simple form.
Right.
And so it goes beyond the traditional data readiness. You have to have data that can be used to train and fine tune generative AI models. And that's special because that requires even higher quality than you might imagine in your data. It implies that you also might have other concerns of where your data need to sit. Certain ways that you need to develop, for example, RAG models. We've heard those about. as you might need to have a vector database instead, right? So many of us think about relational databases as needed, but certain LLMs, or large language models, really need vectorized data, or you
Hmm.
might need data in a graph form as well to complement that if you need to build a knowledge graph on top of it. So there's lots of this higher quality, more bespoke ways that you need to store and maintain and have quality on your data. And then the other two parts I'll mention are really important: diversity in the data, making sure that you have enough data where you can train the model, but also have a data set where you can ground the model as well. And that means that basically you're trying to say, okay, we've trained the model, we've then tuned the model with other data sets. Now we need to make sure that the model is actually um, returning the expected results we need, and we need to have a grounding source of truth for that data as well.
Hmm.
And then the final one is obviously ethical considerations. When you're putting out something out there for generative AI, you want to make sure that at the very least you have a really good understanding of what your ethical parameters are and what you expect it to output that's safe and thoughtful. So
Are the ethical concerns more related to like data privacy, or is it more like, that the output of the model, in this case of an LLM, is, I don't know, the contents of the output are actually, it's ethical, I guess. Like, what does ethical mean in this case, in this context?
I think that's a really great point to hone in on. So I think of it in two ways, right? You want to ensure the data are accurate. You want to ensure the data are unbiased and representative. And you make sure you do that also by having it properly labeled. And that gets into a whole other part of preparing your data: labeling, tagging. The metadata around your data are just as important as the data themselves when you're considering generative AI, right?
Hmm.
And then the other side of the coin is what sometimes think people think of a little bit more when you're thinking about ethical considerations, is addressing privacy, addressing security concerns, especially with sensitive data, having clear ethical guidelines for the development and the deployment of your data. Um, and there's whole industries being built up around that, especially if you're a company that are generating large language models that other people might be picking up and using. You want to make sure that that model, for example, isn't accidentally set up to quote unquote hack somebody's system
Hmm.
way,
Yeah.
right? Have
Yeah.
embedded code that's unethically in there.
Yeah.
There's a lot to consider when
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
building that out.
There's
Yeah,
many security also concerns. Yeah.
yeah,
You
security
mentioned
concerns.
something important, which was the labeling and the tagging of the data to make it useful for AI. So basically, does this mean that if an organization has like a really mature data practice, with good quality, good governance, then that's not enough to, embark on the AI journey? But like, there's also this labeling and tagging exercise. Like, there's also some other activities that need to happen before they can, the organization can start even really jumping into AI.
Yep, absolutely. You want to, and it's a whole other, probably a whole other conversation. But a lot of it is beyond, that term we use, like data munging, right? Making sure that the data are clean. Then it's we often talk about it in terms of, you might have a system that is going in and taking a look at, um, a particular sets of media data, for example, and trying to tag it with the right titles, right? Um, but if it does that, you are always going to need a human in the loop, at least for the time being that I can see, right? You're going to have someone come in and have a little bit of a semi-automated way to come in and check those data to make sure that what the system is suggesting is accurate. Otherwise, your models are going to be, I would predict, wildly skewed,
Hmm. And
right?
there, no, you
Uh,
wouldn't be able to catch it.
right. You wouldn't be able to effectively train and fine tune your models without having. I mean, having that higher level of data quality, right? Gen AI, the difference is that traditional data readiness focuses on having clean, accessible, and well-governed data for just analytics and decision making, right? And then that human in the loop on that end of it assumes that the human is going to be able to make that discernment that only humans can at this point, right? About whether that data is really true or right for the situation.
Mhm.
But with Gen AI readiness, we're leaning so much more on Gen AI to make those decisions
Right.
that it demands this even higher level of data quality, diversity, ethical considerations like we talked about. So you can effectively train and fine tune your generative AI models with confidence.
Interesting, because I would think that from a quality perspective, Gen AI doesn't have the same strict requirements as analytics or, like, say, traditional data readiness might have, because you're going to be making decisions. As you said, someone like a human in the loop is going to make a decision, whereas I would expect the model to also be able to, leave some data, exclude some data, like the anomalies or whatever looks, yeah, anomalous, might be automatically sort of removed to for the Gen AI to work. It's my perception of how quality might play different importance in these two scenarios.
Yeah, it might or might not be. I mean, the Gen AI models, I mean, some of them that, I've seen and played with, right? Like they, kind of depending on what type of model you're running, will sometimes look at the outliers and treat those a little bit stronger than you might expect, right? You might expect it to recognize the long tail and cut off an outlier, but it sometimes it doesn't. It really can end up skewing your mean a lot more than you would expect. Um, I'm thinking of it this way, right? Like traditional data readiness might be sufficient for creating reports or dashboards, right? But Gen AI requires data that can be used to generate new content ideas and even code, right? You're generating new things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you're generating new things, this means that your data needs to be rich, nuanced, and free of biases.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're going to skew the output of your models, like I mentioned,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. It's something so simple, but how with traditional data practices and use cases, it's humans were making decisions, and now you're sort of shifting this and it's computers making the decisions. And so yeah, I think it makes sense, like you have to feed it even better data so that it can make the right decision, because there's no human that's going to be verifying that. Now the verification is going to be happening, if at all, at a later stage, once something has happened, this generation has happened already.
Yeah, I mean, and to take it a step further, I mentioned RAG model earlier, and I should probably say that means retrieval augmented generation, right? And and so the concept of that, though, is that theoretically, if you are not necessarily training your model, the model, most of I think a lot of companies these days are not building and training their own models anymore, right? There's so many fantastic models out there. I think I read a quote a few months ago that said something like, if you wanted to build and train your own model, it'd be upwards of $10 million minimum to do that these days, to have anything be viable or competitive in the marketplace, right?
Yeah.
So um, really then you're talking about tuning your models, and really what you're talking about is your company's gold mine is the data that can use in a RAG model to really tune it, right? Tune the model to the specific output that you want. You have a large corpus of different types of legal documents that you could train the RAG model on to then help your team answer specific questions about, legal considerations, for example, right? Um, that really is, I think, the better opportunity. And so that comes back down to making sure that that data that you're essentially having the model be tuned on is, free of bias and has high data quality, right? Because otherwise it's going to go through what we talk about, hallucinations, and other things, right?
Great, great. Thanks. Yeah. To close off, what advice do you have for data leaders that are looking to jump into the Gen AI journey for their companies? Like, what should they do or what should they not do? What are some of the pitfalls, maybe? Like, whatever advice you want to share with them.
Oh, that's a great question. Uh, I was going to offer advice to someone. I think would say a little bit going back to like I was saying, starting from the basics, right? Start small, focus on the quick wins, and try to build momentum from those. Investing in data quality, investing in governance, investing in skill and team development, and don't be afraid to experiment and iterate. That's really what I would say to companies to start.
Great. I love
Yeah,
it. Yeah, that covers everything, but starting small, definitely you got to start somewhere.
yeah, you got to
Mm.
start somewhere. That's for
Yes.
sure.
Great. Thanks, Karen. I appreciate you coming today. Thanks for the time and great insights.
Oksana, thank you again for the invite. This was super fun. I love talking with you about data, and I'm happy to do it anytime.
Thank you for listening. If you liked today's episode, remember to share and subscribe. And if you want to learn more about what we're doing at Constellation, visit us at constellationdata.com.